So that's 2 minutes now. So. Yeah.
Hello everybody, and you're welcome to the very first episode of Faith and Reason. My name is Dr. Gaven Kerr. I am a philosopher who teaches at St Patrick's College, Maynooth, and I'm joined here with... Who am I joined with?
Hi everyone, my name is Niamh Palmer, and I am a third year student of theology and philosophy.
And you're all very welcome, and thank you listeners for joining with us today for our first episode of Faith and Reason. Just before we get into the episode, I'd like to give you a few details about how to get in contact with us. And please do get in contact with us. Please text us, please call us, contact us through the website, through the email. It's going to be great if you could submit some great questions. Niamh and I have a bet on to see who's going to give the most difficult question for us today in philosophy. So you want to be that individual that gets the most difficult question. You know, we'll praise you for that. So if you'd like to get in touch with us, if you'd like to call us, the number is 01 412 3456, and from outside of Ireland, plus 353 1 412 3456. If you want to text or send a message to the WhatsApp, it's 089 467 2000. That's 089 467 2000. And if you're from outside of Ireland, plus 353 89 467 2000. If you'd like to email into us, it's info@radiomaria.ie. That's info@radiomaria.ie. And if anybody still uses postal address, which I do know some people do, though less and less these days, it's Radio Maria Ireland, St Anthony's Business Park, Ballymount Road, Dublin 22. And for those of you who are online, joining us through the Facebook, through the website, you can get in touch through those platforms as well. So thanks for joining in, and please do send in your questions. We will get to deal with them, we'll get to discuss them. So, the show is on Faith and Reason. I've got my partner in crime here, Niamh, who's a student of philosophy at St Patrick's College, Maynooth, and we're here to talk to you about any matters of philosophical interest relating to our Christian faith. So why don't we dive right in? And what we're going to do today is we're going to sit and talk a little bit about what attracted us to philosophy, what we do as philosophers. I'm in my late 30s now. I hate to say it, but I'll be 39 this year. I've been doing philosophy since I was 16. Niamh is just finishing up her degree in philosophy. So Niamh, tell me, why philosophy? What attracted you to philosophy?
It's probably not the story that you're expecting, but I ended up in philosophy. So I am now doing a double major, but the main degree that I was enrolled in was theology, and you had to pick like different subjects with that. And I ended up in philosophy by total accident. I didn't get the subject choices I wanted, and philosophy was the only one left on the thing. So I was petrified going in. I didn't know how to spell philosophy. I didn't know who Plato was. I didn't like these famous guys that apparently everyone knew. I had no idea who any of those were. But once I was in, I got stuck. I couldn't get back out.
Wonderful. Now here's a question. Here's a philosophical question for you. When you opted for philosophy, and as you say, you didn't choose it to begin with, when you opted for philosophy, and you obviously told your family, right, and your friends, was the first question out of their mouths, what is that?
Yeah, I think I'd say my mother hasn't slept right since.
Right.
When I told her I was doing theology and philosophy, most people do. They either be like, "Oh, okay, that's nice," or else they're like, "What is that?" And it's even harder to explain what it is. But yeah, the question is always, and what are you going to do when you're done with that?
That's the second question,
and
isn't
that's
it?
the question I don't know the answer to.
You don't know the answer to it yet.
Yeah, philosophy is a life skill.
Well, gentle listeners, we hope to at least let you know what philosophy is today. So if you've got anything from tuning in to us today, you will know what philosophy is, and you'll know what philosophers do. And you'll be better off than some professional philosophers, because believe me, as a professional philosopher, I've read some philosophy books whose authors don't even know what philosophy is, and they say, I don't know what philosophy is, but I'm going to write a book about it and get published. So that's what we'll be doing today, gentle listeners. So, well, what is philosophy? Niamh, do you want to tell me, or should I maybe take us through it?
Well, I can tell you the book definition.
What's the book definition?
Well, philosophy is the search for wisdom and truth.
The love of wisdom.
The love of wisdom, even.
Philosophia, so phile, meaning love, and sophia, meaning wisdom. Yeah. Do you know? Do you know, or do you remember who the first individual to call themselves a philosopher was?
Socrates? Plato?
Oh, no, not quite. Just a wee bit before that. It was a guy called Pythagoras.
Okay.
Hopefully we've all heard of Pythagoras. Hopefully at some point we took a subject in school called mathematics, where we learnt that when we put a square on the diagonal of a triangle, on the hypotenuse, do you remember that? The hippopotamus?
Yeah, unfortunately.
It's equal to the sum of the square of the two other sides. Pythagoras' theorem. Pythagoras was the first to call himself a philosopher. And the reason why is he was asked the question, Pythagoras, what sort of wisdom do you study or do you follow? Of which sort of wisdom are you a lover? And Pythagoras says, I'm not a lover of any one wisdom, of any one area of thought. I'm a lover of all wisdoms. I love wisdom. So it's very intense, isn't it? He loves wisdom. Do you love wisdom, Niamh?
I do. All kinds of wisdom.
But it's really interesting that he says that, because it reveals something about the nature of philosophy. Pythagoras is known as, he's what's called one of the pre-Socratic philosophers. We philosophers, we can't have great names for things, because these pre-Socratic philosophers, now when I introduce this to students, it's sometimes a wee bit difficult for them. They're called pre-Socratic philosophers because they were prior to Socrates. That's when they came on the scene. They were before Socrates. So that's our handy philosophical way of designating this group of individuals. They came before Socrates. Well, Pythagoras was one of these philosophers who came before Socrates. But there is another one. There's another one, and I'm going to tell you a wee story about him, and you might enjoy the story about him. It's an interesting one. His name was Thales. 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 He has the great honour of being the first philosopher. And he was several centuries before Socrates and Plato. And there are two stories here that I'm going to tell you about him. One is that he predicted an eclipse. He successfully predicted an eclipse. And the second is that he fell down a well and died. So everybody is sometimes known for how we die, okay? But there's something revelatory in these two stories about what philosophy is. So stick with it, We're going to get us there. I don't know if Niamh was ever in my first year classes where I tell him this story. I'm sure you've heard it anyway.
I've heard the story, yeah, but I've never heard it from yourself.
So think about Thales. Thales was able to predict an eclipse. Now, as I always say to people, just think about that. Niamh, you and I are sitting with our phones in front of us, aren't we? Yeah. Now, we're not playing with our phones, We're here and we're intense, and hopefully you, gentle listeners, aren't playing with your phones as well. So we have our phones and all our technology here. Now, if somebody said to you right here, right now, I want you to predict the next solar eclipse or the next lunar eclipse, what would be the first thing that you would do?
I would think your man's crazy, first of all.
or go to Google.
That's true. My first thought was crazy, but
You would just stick in Google, right, solar eclipse, and then the dates would come up. Okay, Thales obviously doesn't have that available to him, but Thales is able to successfully predict an eclipse. Now think about what sort of mind one would have to do that. Niamh just said your man is crazy. Think about that sort of mindset that you would have to have in order to predict an eclipse. Okay, First of all, you would have to be forgetting about everything around you, keeping, your household, your economics, food, drink, and all the necessities of life. You'd be forgetting about that, wouldn't you? Thales, he's looking up at the heavens. He's seeing, there's something interesting here, the stars and the movement of the heavens. There's something to be plotted. There's something to be known here. And after painstaking observation, Thales realizes there's a pattern to be understood. And having understood that pattern, Thales is able to predict at some point things will align and there'll be an eclipse. Yeah? Straightforward enough.
Yeah.
Now, think about this when an eclipse happened. I've seen a few eclipses in my life, in the last 10 years or so. And everybody's out there going, wow, this is cool. I looked directly at it, nearly blinded myself. This is cool, this is great, look, an eclipse is happening. Now imagine that's happening in Thales' day. Everybody's kind of like, yeah, look at this. Look at the eclipse. And Thales is like, I already knew. Everybody's coming out and saying, Thales, come on out, see the eclipse. He's like, I already knew. I knew it was going to happen. So think about that. Thales, he sees reality, okay? And he sees the heavens, and the heavens are fascinating. We see the stars, and we know about the sun. Throughout history, humanity's been fascinated by the sun. We see the heavens. I'm sure we've got some Star Trek and Star Wars fans out there. The universe is fascinating. We see that, but Thales sees something in it which fascinates him, and he wants to dig deep, and he wants to figure it out. That's the first thing I want to bring up, and that relates us next to the next story. Thales is falling down the well. So Thales is walking along. He's consumed with interest about the heavens, totally and utterly consumed with interest about the heavens, right? And he's walking along, and he falls down the well because he's looking up at the sky. So he falls down this well. Now, this isn't your wee sort of, garden gnome sort of well with the wee wall around it. This is a big giant. This is Sparta sort of well, and he falls right into it, and he dies. There are people nearby who laugh at Thales, and they think, how could you be so stupid to fall down a well? I mean, how stupid could Thales be fall down? He couldn't even see what was under his nose. But think about why Thales fell down the well and didn't see what was under his nose. He didn't see what was under his nose precisely because he wasn't stupid. He had an understanding of the nature of the universe, an understanding which allowed him to predict an eclipse. And in having that understanding, he had to take his mind away from the here and now, what's before us here and now, such as the well in front of him, in order to have that kind of leisure to think through the nature of the universe and so predict the eclipse. So Thales' falling down a well actually goes hand in hand with his predicting an eclipse. He has this frame of mind where he sees particular things in reality, and we would just see them and we would just think, oh, look at that, I'm not going to be bothered with that. But Thales has a mindset of sees it, he is bothered by it, he wants to figure it out, he wants to know about it, and in knowing about it, that causes him to reflect, well, what sort of being am I? What kind of thing am I? What sort of animal am I that can do that? Because dogs don't do that. Lovely as dogs are, I've got a dog. Niamh, you've got 2 dogs, don't you?
3.
3. Oh, God bless you. They don't do that. They're not fascinated by these things so that they pick them apart and think of the order and intelligibility behind them. No. What dogs do is they just engage with things intelligently. Obviously, we can teach a dog to sit, we can teach it to do all sorts of things, but they don't become consumed with interest at the heavens and start to think things through, whereas we do. And when we do that, we start thinking about ourselves and what it is for us to do that. The philosopher is that sort of person. The philosopher is somebody who's fascinated by human nature and the place of humanity here within creation and wants to engage with that and wants to figure that out. Niamh, that's what you are.
Yeah, that's what kept me on the philosophy. Once you get on the philosophy train, you can't get off. Once you open the door, it can't be closed.
That's right. It's addictive, isn't it?
Many times I've nearly fallen down a well, or in Maynooth, into the canal.
Into the canal. Oh dear.
Totally lost in thought.
Mm-hmm. But Niamh, would you say that you begin the wonderful world of philosophy, right? And you're learning all this stuff. So you're learning about Plato, you're learning Aristotle, You're learning about St. Thomas Aquinas, who, by the way, gentle listeners, his feast day is tomorrow, January 28th, the feast of St. Thomas Aquinas, one of my heroes. In time, you will come to, if you stay with us, you'll come to learn an awful lot about St. Thomas. You learn about St. Thomas, you learn about Kant, you learn about Nietzsche, and they're all well and good, aren't they, Niamh? But it makes me a philosopher. It can't just be maybe being able to populate a Wikipedia page of facts about Nietzsche. Is there something else that doing philosophy gave to you? Do you have a greater sort of grasp on things, a greater handle on reality?
I think so. As I said, like once you open the door to philosophy, another door keeps opening and it keeps opening, and you see things you've never seen or many won't see. It changes your outlook. I think I think even in a simple way you can appreciate things around you much more, like the solar eclipse or whatever. But it's also often I find myself sitting in the classroom and thinking, why, how does this affect my life outside of this hour? And sometimes it doesn't. You kind of just, the class was hard going and you just have to take a breather. But you never can for long. Like once you've opened the book,
you have to sort of, go and get a pint of coffee and sit in a dark room for a while.
Coffee is an essential to any philosopher.
It is, exactly. You raise a really important point there, Niamh, because there's another philosopher we can mention. His name is Aristotle. Another ancient philosopher. He was Macedonian and he was a pupil of Plato, tutor to Alexander the Great. He makes a really interesting point in a book of his called The Ethics, or the Nicomachean Ethics. And he says, the way we do things for some sort of reason. So when you went to university, when you went to college, your parents are probably thinking, well, what are you going to do with your degree? I've got 3 children, and a lot of times parents think that. What are you going to do with this? You have to put this to some sort of use, because obviously a career is the be all and end all and all the rest. And you're sitting thinking, how am I going to justify doing philosophy and theology? What career am I going to get out of that? Well, Aristotle, he observed, he realised this. He's back in ancient Greece, 3-4 centuries before Christ. He observed this, that we humans, we do things for a reason. Now, some of the reasons we do things for are not really important. They're not really valuable, So, we earn money, but earning money isn't the goal. Because why do you earn money? Well, to spend it. That's why you earn money. People who have money but they don't spend it on anything, you're like, well, you kind of didn't get the point there with money. You earn it to spend it. So what you value isn't the money, it's what the money can buy you. So it's the coffee that the money can buy you, it's the house, it's the new car, it's the libraries of books, it's the new phone. You value what the money gets you. So it's not the money only has an instrumental value. Okay, it's an instrument that you use to get these things. Aristotle noticed this, and he pointed out, well, look, there's some things that we value which are just instrumental. Okay, they're fine to value them, but they only have a value because they get us something which is valuable in itself, something which is good and useful and noble in itself, something which fulfills human nature, desire. Like what's one of the basic things that we use money to buy? Breakfast, lunch and dinner. What is it? Food, isn't it? Yeah. So, I mean, we use our money to buy food to sustain us because it's one of our basic needs as humans. But a lot of the times in purchasing things and earning money, we earn money because a lot of us, we want to live a life, be married, have children, live in a nice sort of home, because that's valuable in itself, because there's something fulfilling in doing that as part of a human life. It leads to a fully human life when we do have that sort of stability around us. Aristotle makes a point here that all human engagement, all human striving, it can't just be instrumental. It can't just be for things which are useful. Things which are useful have to be for something which is valuable in itself, because useful things, they're like batteries. They're just like batteries. As soon as you use them up, they're useless. The batteries power something like our phones or something like that. And here I want to bring in another philosopher, and you might have heard of him. I think Radio Maria listeners might have heard of him. I know you've heard of him. St. John Paul II. Does that name ring a bell?
Kind of.
Yeah. St. John Paul II, when he was pontiff, he talked about the culture of death. Now, what's the culture of death? The culture of death is this culture of use that Aristotle talks about. When everything we see around us is only useful, like batteries, everything is just seen like a battery, we can just use it for something. What do we do with a battery when we're done with it? Well,
throw it away.
Well, hopefully we throw it away, but we recycle it. Yeah, we dispose of it correctly. Things which are only useful are disposable after we use them. St. John Paul II, and going right back to Aristotle, even through the German philosopher Kant, he makes the point that if everything is only useful, everything can be discarded. There is nothing of value. And obviously John Paul II wants to make the point, as does Aristotle, the human being is something which is valuable in itself, because everything that we find useful is useful for the human being. The human being is a subject of value, and if we do not value the human being, then nothing at all is valuable. And that's an insight that St. John Paul II gets through his reading of Aristotle. But the reason why I bring that up, interesting as it is in itself, and I'm sure we're going to have some questions after the break, is that philosophy helps us in becoming fully human. Because we humans, we're not just like our pets who just engage in the world and just eat and sleep. We think about things. We engage with things in a rational manner. Everything we do is rational. From driving a car to opening a door, it's something that we do as rational beings. Philosophy, in engaging with that, lets us know what it is to be a being of that kind. And so the study of philosophy allows us to be more fully human than we would have been were we not to engage with it at some point in our lives. So this has a lesson for you, Niamh.
Yeah. How can philosophy over a different discipline? So on that day that I chose philosophy, if I had chose business or English, would I have been less human if I had pursued another discipline over philosophy?
So I just said that wasn't Niamh being less human. No, precisely because you make a rational choice over a different discipline, precisely because you're thinking, should I do history? Should I do, what else was on the cards there? English. You should do philosophy, Niamh. Precisely because you do that, you are actually acting as a philosopher, because you're trying to make a wise choice, and in trying to make a wise choice, you are engaged. St. John Paul II, again, in his encyclical Fides et Ratio, Faith and Reason, says every human being by nature is a philosopher because we're reasonable. What the study of philosophy does is allows us to study what it is to be fully human. So just because you don't study it doesn't mean that you're not fully human. The study of it reveals it to us in a systematic way and lets us know what it is. I think that might be a good time. So listeners, thank you for staying with us for this first 20 minutes or so. We realise that might, sort of really kind of, been a bit much for the head. But if I could just encourage you to call in, to text in any of your questions, just to remind you of the numbers. So to call in, it's 01412 3456. And from outside of Ireland, it's plus 353 1412 3456, and the text in the WhatsApp is 089 467 2000. That's 089 467 2000. And if you're outside of Ireland, it's plus 353 89 467 2000. And you can also contact us through our online platforms and the social media. But with that, we'll take a little break for a musical interlude, and we'll come back for more discussion. Okay, welcome back, gentle listeners. I hope you enjoyed the break. Time enough to boil the kettle and get a cup of tea or a coffee, as we were advising. So we're just going to pick up again where we left off and keep going with the discussion. Now, Niamh has just received a comment question that was sent in to us, which we think would be a nice sort of issue to explore in the next 10 to 15 minutes or so. Niamh, why don't you...
So it ties in quite nicely. So from Jerry, he says, so interesting that even Aristotle before Christ saw each human being as valuable in itself.
Each human being is even Aristotle.
Yeah.
This is interesting, Niamh, innit? Because you and I just yesterday were talking about this issue, weren't we? About human dignity and the value of each human person, and why we ought to value them, why persons are centres of value, and they deserve a moral consideration. Isn't that right? Yeah. It's
an interesting question that you can write a whole paper on, like not even talk about for 5 minutes, but especially in modern philosophy, defining human dignity is a very difficult task.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're absolutely right. Especially in modern philosophy, it becomes a difficult task. And I think the reason for that is, well, it's as follows, and we'll all have heard this kind of thought experiment before. When we talk about dignity, a lot of the talk is, well, people are only subjects of dignity because they're able to think, or they have minds, or something like that. They're able to have thoughts, because when you have a thought and you have let's say an interest in something that's going to happen to you, well, you can protest against what somebody's going to do to you. Isn't that right? At the very least, people want to say, well, look, if all persons have dignity and all persons are things that think, or rational things, then we only value the things that are able to think. And then that raises questions, because sometimes we want to say that there are some human beings that are valuable and that, let's say, have a right to life and have dignity and everything that goes with that, who don't seem to have minds, such as children, very young children, the preborn, those who are seriously ill, nearing the point of death, people like that. And this really does become a problem in modern philosophy, and it wasn't a problem in pre-modern philosophy. And there's a reason for that. Niamh, do you know who I'm going to blame for this?
The phenomenologist, the existentialist.
No, not at all. It's the one person I blame for all the problems in philosophy. My students, if any of my students are listening, he's going to say it. It's all Descartes' fault.
Of course.
It's Descartes' fault. Famous French philosopher René Descartes, famous mathematician as well, came up with Cartesian geometry. Funnily, it's named after him, Descartes, Cartesian geometry. René Descartes, he wrote a really famous book called The Meditations on First Philosophy. And in the Meditations, he famously doubted everything. He think, well, look, let's just doubt everything that we could possibly doubt. Just throw it all out. Any of us are familiar with the movie The Matrix or Inception? And we think, how do I know that reality is really real? You know those stereotypical questions that we think philosophers are asking. How do I know that I'm not being systematically deceived by some evil demon or a matrix machine, or that I'm stuck inside somebody's thoughts or dreams, such as in Inception? It's known as a brain in a vat scenario in philosophy. Imagine you're just a brain in a vat in a laboratory, and a scientist is making you see everything as it is. And people take this seriously for some reason. Well, Descartes entertained this, and he very famously in the Meditations doubted everything he could possibly doubt. And he said, look, for all I know, there could be some evil demon tricking me into thinking all that I see is real. That's our matrix scenario. Now, obviously he doesn't believe that, and he's going to find a way out of it. Okay, but this is how he starts off. His point is that, well, if I don't know, if I can't tell that everything around me isn't a deception, I can't really know anything. And then famously, in the second meditation, Descartes thinking to himself, well, look, if there is a demon or an evil scientist, or the Matrix is just deceiving me into thinking that all this is real when it isn't, I at least must exist in order to be deceived. I have to exist. Niamh, I don't know if you exist, but I must at least exist if I'm doubting your existence. Because if I didn't exist, I wouldn't be able to be deceived to do that. And that's where he comes up with the very famous Cogito Sum, I think I am. Not Cogito Ergo Sum, that's a little later. Cogito Sum, I think I am. So in his thinking, he knows that he exists, but here is where it gets a wee bit crazy for personal dignity. Because if all he can be sure of is that he exists, but he can't be sure if his body exists or if his arms or legs exist, he can't be sure that, if he's even a material thing. He can be sure if he exists, but he doesn't know if everything he sees and perceives, such as his body and his hands and feet, exist. Then he is not identical to his body. He is not his body. He has a mind. And that was the invention of the mind in Western philosophy. Prior to that, there really wasn't a view that we human beings had this thing called a mind. Aristotle was of the view that we human beings are these physical substances that we see. We are a certain kind of living thing. St. Thomas Aquinas was of the same view. The Church, in fact, at the Council of Vienne, canonically defined that the soul isn't a separate substance from the body, it's a form of the body. That's the Council of Vienne, following the Aristotelian view and St. Thomas Aquinas' view. We'll talk about more of that in a different episode, Niamh, won't we? But Descartes comes along, and now I am a mind. That's what I am. I am a mind. So the person is the mind. And then an English philosopher by the name of John Locke, very influential on the founders of the United States, John Locke, he said that to be a person is to be conscious of oneself, not conscious of other things, but to be conscious of yourself. That's what makes you a person. So to be a person is to be able to exercise thought. And if you don't have a mind, or if you're not conscious, you're not a person. So that's children, the unborn, those who are seriously ill, seriously disabled, those who are asleep, they're not people. And so they're not subject to moral dignity. But enter in a German philosopher by the name of Immanuel Kant, very influential in John Paul II. Immanuel Kant, in his moral theory, pointed out that we should act in such a way that we treat other persons as ends in themselves and not as a means to an end. You never treat a person as an end, you treat other way around. You never treat a person as a means, you always treat a person as an end in themselves. Why do we do that? Do you ever think about that, Niamh? Why should we treat a person as an end and not as a means to an end?
I mean, in a very simple level, it's a moral kind of a question, like kind of what you were saying earlier about like using things and humans. It just, in a simple way, seems that humans shouldn't be used. Like,
Well, there's a reason for it. And it's a reason that John Paul II points out in Love and Responsibility, book that he wrote. It's a reason that Immanuel Kant points out, and it's a reason that goes right back through St. Thomas Aquinas back to Plato, and it's this: a person is the kind of thing that is rational. Not that a person is a thing that is reasoning, a person is a thing that is rational. It's a rational animal. That doesn't mean you always have to be reasoning to be a person. So, Niamh, both you and I have two legs, we're able to walk, aren't we? So we're the kind of things which are two-legged, but when you were born, were you able to walk?
No.
So you didn't have the use of your legs, but you still had your legs. Yeah? There are some animals who have, they have eyes, but when they're born, they don't have the use of their eyes, but they still have eyes. They're still sighted animals, even if they don't have the use of their sight. Well, it's the same with our reason, it's the same with our rationality. We may not be reasoning, we may not be using our rationality, but we're still rational, even if we're not using it, in the same way that we're two-legged or we're sighted. Just because we don't use our rationality doesn't mean that we're not rational. The view that we can only be rational when we use our reason is Descartes' view. That to be rational is to be using our reason. Otherwise, we just wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be ourselves. Whereas the non-Cartesian view, the view that arguably can be found in Kant and right back through to Aquinas and to Aristotle, is simply that if you're a certain kind of thing, then you're a person. And the kind of thing that makes you a person is to be a rational kind of thing. And the kinds of things which are rational are humans. Humans are those kinds of things. Now, not every human has the use of their reason, but they still have reason, given how they're basically put together. They still have reason, they still have rationality, they're just not using it. such as when they're asleep, or drunk, or newborn, or preborn, or severely disabled, or unconscious. They're still rational, but they're just not using their reason. Now, why would we value those things? Okay, the European Declaration of Human Rights and the Universal Declaration, which was written by followers of St. Thomas Aquinas, just to let you know.
Of course.
These conventions and declarations says that we are born with dignity. We don't acquire it. We're born with it. We come with it into the world, which means we have it with us, as if it were our luggage that we brought with us on the trip into the world. So we are born into the world with our dignity. It's not granted to us, and we don't obtain it. Why would they think that? This is the reason. So I've really been putting off giving you the reason. This is the reason. Rational things are the kinds of things that can determine their ends for themselves. They are the kinds of things which can determine their ends for themselves. That doesn't mean that they always do so, because a lot of the times I don't determine my ends for myself. I want to get home today. So, gentle listeners, if you haven't already noticed, I'm from Belfast, so I want to get home back to Belfast later. And there's some ends which I don't determine for myself, but which I follow because there's some goal I wish to achieve. So I have to drive at the speed limit. I'm not going to go through the toll booth, so I don't have to pay the toll. I'll take the back roads. But there are various things that, in committing ourselves to some sort of goal, we are constrained in some sort of way. Nevertheless, we're the kind of things which do determine our ends for ourselves in being rational things. And this was Kant's insight, and this was the insight of our other philosophers. If we are those kind of things, then to treat us as if we couldn't determine our ends for ourselves. In other words, to treat us as a means to an end. To treat us not as subjects, not as persons, but to treat us as something different from persons is not to treat us as the kind of things that we are. So to treat us not as ends, not to value us as valuable beings in ourselves, but just to use us the way we would use money or batteries, is not to treat us as humans. It's to be inhuman towards us. So we're not being treated as humans if we're not valued as ends in ourselves. And that goes through the whole experience of our morality, and that's where personal dignity lies. Now, I know as Catholics we are in the image and likeness of God, and part of being in that image is being able to know and to love God as the good that He is. That's our rational nature. That's the image and likeness of God that we have in us. Our dignity comes from that, and we can know that without appeal to revelation, because we're the source of things that can determine our ends for ourselves, and so we can be valued in and of ourselves, ought to be valued in and of ourselves. And somebody who doesn't value a human being as the centre of value that they are is not treating that human being as the kind of thing that it is, and thus is morally culpable. There's human dignity, Niamh.
Just like that, yeah.
What do you think of that?
It's just when you, like, in, I suppose what we call like postmodern philosophy, if you pull that out, if you pull that away, the idea of humans being, dignity being innate to the human being, in the, like, the kind of philosophy that I would read and study, like, they pull that out and they don't define the human being as the rational soul, or
as a rational animal.
Yeah, a rational animal. And they, like, begin to question, like, what makes the person a person and not just kind of a human being. So we take the form of a human being, hence, like, we're human beings, but we're not necessarily people, I suppose.
So those modern philosophers, they're following, quite thoroughly on a Cartesian view of what it is to be a person, that what it is to be a person is to think in some sort of way. And that's what constitutes personhood. But in reality, the ability to think is just something that we do, that an individual does. Thinking is not itself an individual. You can't, get a hold of thought and just hold it out there and say, this is the person. But you can get a hold of a person and hold them by the shoulders, and give them a good shake.
And I was actually meant to write a dissertation on human dignity, but I changed courses. But one of the things that kind of...
You should have come to me, Niamh. You should.
I know. One of the things, it was like a really simple example, but it was the way we treat each other, like every day, is that, often when we use each other, the way we use things, in that way, are we questioning someone's dignity.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. John Paul II in Love and Responsibility, Immanuel Kant and other philosophers have pointed this out, that when we use somebody for our own good, we're not treating them as the person that they are and how they ought to be treated. Now, we can make reciprocal kind of use of each other in the sense that we can band together for some sort of common goal.
Yeah.
That's perfectly fine. So I'm married, my wife and I kind of, we're united against the children. If anybody has young children, it's a war zone sometimes, and you have to put up the common front. So you can band together and you become a unit in virtue of a common good. But then there's the definite use of another person, which, like in the extreme case, slavery. You're using another person, determining that person's ends as if they were your own. So it's like, your use of a battery or something like that. And in our everyday occurrences, if we want to be morally circumspect, we have to think that through as to how we engage with people. Do we use them, or do we treat them as the subjects of value that they are? And that's part of the thing of, growing to moral maturity. Yeah. Maybe we'll take a wee break there. We'll let the gentle listeners sort of reflect on some of that. If anybody has any questions they want to send in, again, the text and the WhatsApp number is just 089 467 2000. That's 089 467 2000. And if it's from outside of Ireland, it's plus 353 89 467 2000. That's plus 353 89 467 2000. We'll have a wee bit of a musical interlude now just to relax to.
Where can I get 5 rosaries a day?
Cuando Maria.
Where can I get daily mass?
Cuando Maria.
Where can I pray my Divine Mercy Chaplet?
Cuando Maria.
Where can I pray the Liturgy of the Hours?
Cuando Maria.
Do join us here on Radio Maria Ireland as we provide prayer each day throughout the day for you and all our listeners and friends. So once more, where is it possible to obtain this prayer support?
Cuando Maria.
Okay, and we're back again, and we've got about 10 minutes left. Niamh pushed me, pushed us over our time with all those questions. Now, Niamh has, we've received a few questions here, and we've got a great question about a dog.
Yeah.
So Niamh's going to ask us this question about a dog.
This is actually a question I was thinking of myself. So they say, Gaven says that we are rational, which is fair enough, but is my dog not rational too? She was able to learn new various behaviours which she did not know before she was taught. Is this not rationality? If not, what is the difference?
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent question, and it always comes up in the context of dogs. That's why I use the example. I've got a dog myself. I've got a black Labrador, so very intelligent dog. You're really able to teach these animals, sort of great things, and they do cotton on. And they do get the idea, especially something like a Labrador, fetch, you're able, with the fetch command, you're able to teach it to sit, roll over, do everything. So great, wonderful, wonderful question. Do we have the name of the questioner?
No, unfortunately.
No? Okay. I think this might be the best question. This is going to be the best one. We did say so. Anonymous, you win the prize for the best question. Okay, so what's the difference there? What's the difference between being rational, which is what we do, and dogs? Okay, are they rational? Do we want to say that they're rational? Well, here's what the difference is. I'm going to say a name, G.K. Chesterton. If anybody has heard of G.K. Chesterton, he's got a great book called The Everlasting Man, and he's got a great discussion of this issue right at the beginning. You take primitive man, okay, so primitive humanity, and one of the earliest things that we have from primitive humanity are the cave paintings in the caves in France, okay? So we have these sort of very early cave paintings, and that's kind of the first sign of kind of human sort of society gathering habitation, and we think, okay, well, yeah, they're just these rudimentary cave paintings, what's the big deal? Chesterton really makes the point here, and I think this is a good point when it comes to rationality, is that one of these sort of primitive individuals, aside from the day of hunting and going out there and having to take care of the needs of life and everything, they observed something. What they were paintings of were paintings of, I think, deer or antelope or something like that, just a herd of animals. They observed something about it and they just thought, wow, that is really interesting. I think I'm going to depict that. There's just something I see in this which has caught my attention, and I'm going to represent that. Not just to myself, but I'm going to represent that here on this canvas, which is, the wall of the cave. And what Chesterton draws out from this is that rationality is the basis of creativity. Rationality isn't just about learning things. That's intelligence. And there are far more intelligent animals than human beings. Dogs being one of them, but there are other animals as well which are totally intelligent. But what rationality is, what it's the fountain of, is this kind of creativity where we notice the world. Niamh, you were talking about earlier, you kind of sort of realise you see the world in a kind of a new light when you do philosophy, a new luminosity. There's a new light which, being rational, shines on things which merely being intelligent doesn't shine on things. Lots of individuals are intelligent, but not every individual is wise. Not every individual is engaging their reason. It takes intelligence to do any of a number of things, but it takes being reasonable to be creative in our doing of those things. So, for example, any intelligent being can open the door to a building. My cat can open a door. My dog, well, she's still a wee pup. I think she's afraid to open the door and to leave us. But I'm sure plenty of dogs, we've seen dogs opening doors to rooms and stuff. That's intelligent. But then what rationality adds to that? It transforms the whole dimension in which we deploy our intelligence. Because what if you go to open a door and there's some sort of issue there, the door's locked, there's a barrier, you see an individual that you might want to have a conversation with, all these 1001 different things that could happen which don't fit into a kind of calculative intelligence. And that's what intelligence is. It's calculative. It calculates things. It calculates our means to ends processes. And that's the classic way that we train dogs, by means ends. Now, it used to be people trained dogs, with the stick, but now we know it's better to train dogs with the treat. We got the treat bag, and we show the dog the treat or something that it wants, like me with my Labrador, with the fetch command, and we get it to habituate a certain behaviour in response to certain commands. That's all well and good, that's intelligence, but rationality is something different. Rationality is reactive, and it's sort of seeing all of that in a transformed light, in the way the primitive humanity, say, saw the deer running in the field and just thought this was interesting and decided to represent it. Chesterton's point is that there's no difference between that primitive individual and somebody like Aristotle. It's not as if after another 1,000 years or so something was added to that which made these individuals rational. Okay, so it's not just that we need more and more of something and then all of a sudden that tips over into the edge to being rational. No matter how intelligent any sort of animal is or any human is, that intelligence doesn't make them rational. Rationality is the ability to deal with abstract reasons, and the most unintelligent human individual can deal with abstract reasons, whereas the most intelligent non-human animal can't deal with those abstract reasons, which is why we have these means ends training processes. So that's the difference between rationality, which deals with abstract reasons, and intelligence.
Yeah. Okay, so while an animal may be intelligent, they are not rational.
Yeah, because they're not working out of reasons.
Yeah.
A dog isn't, thinking to itself, well, in playing fetch and rolling over, I will be pursuing the good here, and the good will fulfill my nature, and in fulfilling my nature, I will be leading a happy life. A dog is, right, ball, this is what I want, this gets me the ball, go. That kind of thing. Or treat, that's what I want, this gets me the treat, go. Yeah. And once that is fulfilled, it's sleep time. So, whereas with human beings, once that is fulfilled in human beings, we start to reason. Culture starts to develop, philosophy starts to develop, scientific endeavour starts to develop, language becomes more complex, more multifarious. So we had another question there just as our time is beginning to come to an end. That was a great question, Anonymous, so you get the prize for the best question, and I'm sure we will come back to that issue again. But we had another great question, which I think is a good one to wrap things up.
Yeah, so Gavin, can you recommend any good books for someone starting out that one might consider purchasing? That's from Peter.
Well, there's this philosopher at St Patrick's College who wrote 2 books on Aquinas, but
I'm not sure they're beginners.
No, they're not beginners books, and they're way too expensive as well. So, can I recommend any good philosophy books? Peter Kreeft does a lot of good introductory level books on philosophy. They're really well worth beginning at. Any one of those books by Peter Kreeft. He's written one on logic, on relativism, on all sorts of stuff. He's written a lot of stuff. There are also a number of very good histories of philosophy. The History of Philosophy by Frederick Coppelston. It comes in 12 volumes, and you can pick a period of philosophy you might be interested in. Ancient, medieval, whatever. And Frederick Coppelston has a volume on that. Give a good read of that, and that'll give you that's introductory level. Now that's introductory level philosophy for somebody who's interested and wants to study philosophy. I certainly recommend that to all the first years in the class. But what I tend to do is that if somebody wants to study philosophy, if somebody is interested in studying philosophy in their spare time, there's nothing better than going back to the philosophers themselves. Now, don't go to Kant. Don't go to Aquinas. The philosopher that you should read, I think, if you're just interested in reading philosophy and you want to read an actual philosopher, is Plato. The reason why, Plato founded a school called the Academy, and he wrote these dialogues, and the dialogues were written so that people who were not members of the Academy would think, what's going on in there? I'm interested in this. So they were written as propaganda for Plato's Academy. So, just your normal educated person would be able to understand the philosophy that Plato was getting at. If you get Plato's collected dialogues, you will not regret reading Plato. It's classics of Western culture and Western literature. And in particular, the early dialogues which deal with the last days of Socrates, leading up to Socrates' execution. We didn't even get to talk about Socrates' execution today. For next week, we'll talk about the death of the philosopher. Plato writes about Socrates' trial and execution, and one particular dialogue called the Phaedo, P-H-A-E-D-O, the Phaedo. Philosophers call their dog this. It talks about Socrates' execution, where he was made to drink hemlock and all his friends are around him. It's such a moving dialogue to read, and you're also getting inaugurated into a philosophical way of life. So if you want to read some original philosophy, I seriously recommend reading Plato's dialogues. Otherwise, Frederick Coppelston's History of Philosophy. Otherwise, Peter Kreeft's various books on philosophical issues. C.S. Lewis as well has some great philosophical writings. He himself was a philosopher, and it was a toss-up between being a professor of philosophy and professor of literature. C.S. Lewis is great to read. G.K. Chesterton as well, another great author to read. And with that, we're coming to the end of our time. So thank you, listeners. This has been a blast and a great first show.
Thank you, Gavin.
Have you enjoyed yourself, Niamh?
I have, actually. I was very nervous.
Okay.
I've had a great time.
Please,
I've learned a lot.
Please, listeners, do come back next Thursday. Send in any of your questions. We've got a ton of good questions here. We will address these in our next show. And if I could just say, if anybody is interested in studying philosophy at a higher level, please do have a look at the St Patrick's Pontifical University website in Maynooth and some of our undergraduate philosophy programs. We do diplomas, we do the full 3-year degree, we do all sorts, and you'll get to come and learn philosophy from some eccentric individuals like myself and be fellow students with people like Niamh. But for now,